Good morning. Welcome to everyone to our monthly Development Services Forum. My name is Ethan Bindernagel, Planning Manager here for the city, and appreciate all of you showing up this morning. We have an interesting topic for this month's discussion, a discussion of parking, which may not sound interesting, but I think actually we have a good array of speakers who are going to address broadly what the city's doing now and what others are doing in collaboration with the city and also independently from the city. But also in the realm of parking, what we're looking to do in the future with respect to rules, regulations, et cetera, from a regulatory standpoint. So we've got, as I mentioned, a nice roster of speakers lined up for you this morning. I'd like to start off, as we do every month, with just kind of a quick welcome. I'd like to recognize those in the room. I'd like to welcome the mayor, Rich Carlston. Appreciate you being here this morning. We also have a couple of other members of staff. And we have, I see, a host of developers of various stripes and kinds, so we welcome all of you as well. And also a welcome to our speakers. Thank you, Bob and Carla and Andy, this morning. The second part of our agenda typically is just a quick Did You Know as the segment. It's an update on some things you may or may not be aware of, some changes or other news tidbits to share with you. Wanted to let everyone know, especially those of you who are residential developers and may have an interest, our accessory dwelling unit ordinance goes into effect this Friday, the 20th. So I encourage you, if you have any questions about what does that mean, how does that impact me, if at all, feel free to follow up with me or one of the staff in the planning division. You can follow up with the duty planner, give a call or email, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Secondly,
is there
yes,
someone
Jerry.
on your staff that is the expert in that? Okay.
So the question was, is there someone on staff who's the expert on that? I can tell you that Tricia Cogiat worked on the ordinance itself, but all of the staff in the planning division are able to answer questions. We have a worksheet or a handout that we have put together that we'll be finalizing, making available for folks who may have questions. We can distribute that electronically via PDF by email. So yes, if you have questions, anyone on staff can answer the questions you may have. All of them are well versed in the ordinance and the changes that have been made. Secondly, wanted to touch upon some upcoming news or agenda items at our Planning Commission as it relates to housing. There are going to be some proposed changes by Margot Ernst in our housing program. She has addressed this group before related to the inclusionary zoning ordinance and the commercial linkage fee. Some changes to reflect those changes made by the state, but also to reflect some cleanup items that have been perhaps outstanding and in need of attention for a little bit. And therefore, Margot is going to be taking that to our Planning Commission on October 26th and council thereafter, though I'm not sure of the exact date, but I want to let you know and be aware of that. Without further ado, I'd like to move on, unless there are any questions on any of those two topics or other news or other tidbits. Seeing none, but thank you, Jerry, for your question. I'd like to move on to our next, our third, and highlight our spotlight. Today we're talking about parking, specifically, nice title, by the way, Jessica, thank you. Rules of the road, parking requirements, usage, and innovation. We're going to be talking with Carla Hansen from the city manager's office. She is the assistant to the city manager. She heads up, among other things, the city's parking program, Enterprise Fund. And then we also have Bob Power, president of ParkSmart, who regulates and helps to control a lot of the parking, privately held parking here in Walnut Creek. And then we have from staff, Andy Smith, who's a senior long-range planner and transportation planner here on staff, to talk to you about what the future holds with respect to regulations, the regulatory scheme for the city going forward. Without further ado, please, Carla, come on up, take it away, and learn us something.
Good morning, everyone. Trying to get the energy up in the room a little bit. I know we got donuts and coffee, but. So, as Ethan mentioned, I'm Carla Hansen. I'm assistant to the city manager. I work in the city manager's office. One of the major programs I manage is the city's parking enterprise. Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we manage parking, the rules and regulations around that, our parking ordinance, what we've done recently as far as parking changes that have made a difference in our parking we've seen so far, and what's coming in the future. So I can talk about this for hours. I've been given 10 minutes. So there is room for questions at the end. I love questions, so when I'm finished, please pelt me with them. So parking by the numbers. Total downtown, we have roughly 10,000 spaces of parking. 30% of those spaces are managed by the city. 70% are managed privately, and you'll hear about that after my presentation. So we control 3,000 spaces. About 1,500 of those are on street and are metered, and 1,500 are in our 3 city garages, which are in the heart of downtown. So what do we do as far as parking? We are managing supply and demand. This is what I like to call the economics of parking. With limited supply and never-ending increasing demand, our aim is to find a balance. And really, we are supporting the economic vitality of downtown. So getting more people here more often and having them feel good about it is what our goals are. I like to think about parking economics as kind of the Goldilocks concept. So if pricing is too low, your spots are going to be full. If pricing's too high, no one is going to come and park. So we're aiming for that sweet spot, that just right Goldilocks sweet spot. And the way we do that really is through rates, time limits, and enforcement. Those are our 3 tools. And where our kind of goal here is our very wonky concept of 85% occupancy, which really translates to 1 or 2 spaces are open on any given block at any given time downtown. So that's even during our peak times when people really want to be downtown. So that's lunch and dinner. This is an industry standard. Other cities who manage parking in this way abide by this 85% occupancy goal. Really, that just means we want 15% of our spaces vacant so people can easily drive down the street, find a space, get in, get out, or stay as long as they want. So I like to think about the best parking experience you have is the one you don't remember. So when you come downtown, you find a space, you pay, you leave, you don't have a ticket. All you remember is maybe your dinner, your drink, your friends, the conversation. You don't remember parking. When you remember the parking, that's when, oh, we got a problem. So our goal is 85%, and we codified this goal in our parking ordinance in 2012. And our parking ordinance really sets a number of goals. So this 85% demand-based goal and program, but it also sets a park once and walk. We want people to come downtown, park once in a garage or in a space, and then explore the downtown instead of driving around to multiple spaces. And that way we're reducing congestion and traffic as well as greenhouse gas emissions. So our ordinance also sets the days and hours of our operations. So we operate our parking 10 to 8, or we charge for parking rather, 10 to 8, Monday through Sunday. And the ordinance also sets a process for adjusting rates. So our process is based on data. So the way you manage to an 85% goal is everything comes down to how much data you have and what that data is telling you. We give an update to our Transportation Commission, who has authority under the ordinance to adjust rates and time limits, about once a year, and they have the authority to adjust rates in increments 50 cents up or 50 cents down on a not more than quarterly basis. They're also in charge of incentive programs for our garages and things like that. The ordinance also governs how we use parking revenue. So parking revenue is reinvested in the downtown. We pay for the cost of our parking operations, so that's meter maintenance, that's our garages, that's our enforcement team, as well as asset and capital maintenance. We also pay for enhancements, so that's the free trolley downtown, the 2 routes, routes 4 and 5. Our public safety officers that keep our downtown safe. Landscaping and beautification, which makes people just feel good when you're downtown. And we also support programming with our Walnut Creek Downtown Association. So how do we manage this? When you manage a demand-based program, everything comes down to the data. And prior to about a year ago, we were doing once-a-year parking studies that would kind of tell us, hey, your occupancy is about 90% in your core area of downtown, and you should make some changes in the upcoming year. And that really wasn't the best way to manage parking when it's a very ever-changing program and demand. So we switched to we contracted with a data analytics company out of MIT, actually, that gives us real-time parking data from our garages and our on-street spaces. So actually, we can bring up a dashboard at any given time during the day and see how occupied our parking spaces are downtown in our garages and on street. And this really gives us a really granular way to monitor our trends downtown so we can make better policy decisions when it comes to parking. So actually, this map here breaks up our downtown metered zone, as we call it, into 4 sections. So this red section is what we call the core downtown. So this is where everybody wants to be. If you think about it as Locust, Broadway, and Main Street, this is where all our restaurants, our shops, everyone wants that space right in front, and they want to stay a while. So this area is our most impacted area, and our occupancy is fairly high, 90% to 100% full at our peak times, and it stays that way most of the day. And then our other areas, what I like to call the yellow, the north, the green is the west, and the purple is the south. These are what I say periphery or our outer areas of downtown, and these are a little bit further away, 1 or 2 blocks away. These are less occupied for various reasons, and my next slide will kind of talk more about that. And we recently made some adjustments to how we manage this area in July, and we implemented in September. So our data was showing us that our parking demand really wasn't balanced. We had our downtown core, as I mentioned, that red area, which also includes our 3 parking garages, were full at peak times, so which is lunch and dinner. Lots of people wanting to come downtown. Whereas our other 3 areas were less occupied, and when we were looking at how we manage this area, we were saying, well, maybe, it's the rates, it's the time limits, or it's the enforcement. Those are the tools we have. So we looked at first the rates, and we determined, okay, when parking is too occupied, your rate's probably too low. And when your spaces are less occupied, your rates are probably too high. But we also looked at this time limit, and given that the area north, south, and west is a little bit further from downtown, maybe it's the time limit that's really not making people want to park here. So we suggested to our Transportation Commission, hey, let's adjust this time limit in these outer areas and see what happens. So we implemented that in September, actually September 15th. So we're about a month into that change. And we had to tell people about these areas and the time limits being removed. Not everyone really thinks about time limits when they're coming downtown to park. It's probably only me. So we were thinking, how are we going to tell people about this? So we decided to make the poles on the meters that have no time limits purple. And this is now, there are no time limits on these purple poles in downtown. And so this really is getting to those customers that want to stay a little bit longer than 2 hours, and our employee population that comes down and works. They now have an on-street space that they can park at for longer term. And the space is fairly open. These areas are at peak 60% occupied. So if you go 1 or 2 blocks downtown, specifically during lunch or dinner, you will probably find a space at a purple parking pole, and you can stay longer. Also, a thing that's really convenient for parkers is we have a mobile payment app that we've been deployed with for about a year. And this is great for these spaces because you can actually pay for parking with your phone. It'll remind you when your space is going to expire, about 15 minutes before it expires, and then you can actually extend your time with your phone. So you never have to return to your meter. You could stay for as long as you want, really 10 to 8. So with a month of implementation, we've seen a 10% demand increase in these areas, which is what we want. We want people to shift demand, go to the outer areas, park once, walk into downtown. So that's with a month of implementation. And really what this has come to, or how we got here, is telling people about this. So in our nutshell, our citywide newsletter, big spread went out to about, I think it's 70,000 residents. We've also had a huge social media campaign, and face-to-face interaction is always great with our businesses, so we have created some flyers that our volunteers have been giving out, so I will give you some of these so you can tell your friends about it. But this is one of those things where small tweaks to our parking program that the Transportation Commission made, just removing time limits, we're seeing a difference in how people park, and we're changing behavior. So that is one thing that I'm really excited about and telling a lot of people about. But what's next for us? So Another way we want to tell people about how and where to park is we have a grant from our Metropolitan Transportation Commission for about almost $1 million to create a wayfinding guidance system. So this is a smart cities initiative where we are telling people where a space is and if it's occupied or not occupied through a mobile app, and also through connected vehicles and their navigation systems. So vehicles that are being made right now are coming with GPS systems that can actually guide you to an open space. And so and phones do the same thing. So we are, with this grant, going to be building infrastructure into our parking spaces downtown and our garages to actually, when you enter Walnut Creek or you're looking for your restaurant in Walnut Creek, it'll actually guide you to an open space near that area. So that is coming. We're likely going to start that project in March, going out for an RFP and all of those things. So more to come on that one. Managing demand also means we have to manage our supply. So we are looking at how do we utilize our existing structures to create more parking supply downtown. So we are researching a pilot program for attendant-assisted parking, which I like to call valet light, in our garages. So we are going to likely start with our Broadway garage, which is on Broadway, on this side over here. And really what this will do is what the industry calls it stacking parking, which really just means double parking cars in your garage to create more spaces. So with doing this, we can actually get 80 more spaces of parking downtown without having to build a brand new garage, and the cost is low for the labor that you need to run a program like this. So we are going to be piloting that to see how can we increase our supply and utilize more of our spaces that are already there. And then a dynamic pricing model. So you've probably heard in the news, or maybe it's just me that monitors parking in all of our cities around the Bay Area, of a dynamic pricing model. So charging instead of a flat rate all day, you charge when there is more demand. You charge a higher rate, and you charge a lower rate when there's less demand. So we call that dynamic pricing. So for us, our trends downtown are really, we see peaks at lunch and dinner, as I've mentioned, on the weekends and weekdays. And so we are looking at a model where we would actually charge more during the lunch and dinner hours for those premium spaces close, so that core red area on that map. Continue to charge less in the outer areas with longer term parking, and adjust how we charge in our garages. And that would change based on demand as we manage it in real time. So we're looking at those changes as well as attendant-assisted parking. And with that, happy to take your questions. Yes.
Excellent presentation, by the way. And you mentioned the data. I think you said 10,000 parking places, 3,000 are cities. So is everything that all your data right now that you're tracking in real time just on the 3,000?
Yes.
And is it possible with this vendor, with the cooperation of the private meters, to eventually link that data and
Actually, I
combine
don't
that?
want to
Is that a
preempt
good
Bob,
question?
but
Leading question?
Bob is actually also contracted with the same company we are. So pretty soon we're going to be able to combine our data and see the full picture of downtown demand at any given time, which is actually the first in the nation that's doing this. So yay to us, right?
I'll be talking in detail about that.
If there aren't any other questions, wow, what a segue. Nicely done.
Planted question, maybe?
Yeah. Carla, thank you. I'd like to take a moment to introduce Bob Power, president of Parc Smart. He's got a presentation as well, which I'll pull up here momentarily. I think you're all set,
Yeah.
mic-wise, otherwise?
I think I'm doing this.
Okay.
And then let me get our so here it is. Okay, got it. Oh yeah. Okay, great. Making parking a pleasurable experience. We're all we're all lazy, including me. Let's face it. When we're driving down that street, we want to find that spot right in front of that restaurant or that business that we're going to. If we don't find that spot, our perception is parking really sucks. And that's just the fact. City-owned parking versus privately owned parking. Carla talked a little bit about this. So within the core downtown, there's 10,000 parking spaces. 3,000 of the spaces, 30% is managed by the city, which includes the South Locust Garage, Locust, and Broadway Garage, and the on-street parking meters. And the remainder, 70%, is off-street, and that includes Broadway Plaza, Broadway Point, Olympia Place, Plaza Escuela. Anyways, what is the true value of a parking space? The true value of a parking space is not how much you charge for parking, it's how much the consumer spends while they're in that parking space. When Neiman Marcus came in, Broadway Plaza called us up and asked us a lot of questions, and that's one of the questions we asked them. Do you know what your value of your parking spaces are? And so they did a survey, and all their tenants are on triple net lease, so it was easy for them to do. So they took a Saturday, and they had all the businesses reporting the revenues for the Saturday, divided by the number of parking spaces, came out to about $3,000 per day per stall, which is astronomical. When I heard this data, I thought, wow, they made a mistake. So we actually went into one of our parking lots, and we did the same survey. And it was on next to Sasa. Not that busy of a parking lot, a lot of restaurants and few shopping stores in that area. Our survey came up with about $1,200 per day per stall. So that's the true value of a parking space. It's the amount the consumer spends while they're in that space. Parking can affect a lot of things. It can affect the success of a business. If you don't have parking, your customers can't park, and it's going to hurt your business. It's also going to affect sales tax revenue. As business is down, it affects sales tax. Employment, if you have a 10,000 square foot space and you're a restaurant and business is down, well, you can run it with 5 employees versus 10. So it affects employment, property values. If that retail space, if you're renting out that retail space and your tenants aren't making it because of parking, that value of that property goes down, and it trickles down to property taxes. And most of all, we call it, it affects consumer confidence. So consumer confidence is the confidence you have when you get in your car and you come downtown, what confidence you have you're going to find a close parking spot. And that's what we call consumer confidence. If you have a bad experience, you're just going to get on the freeway and get off the next exit and be in Lafayette. You're going to be in Pleasant Hill. You're going to be in Concord. So it's very important that we work all together to make sure customers have a good parking experience. So the questions come up: why do we have parking limits, and why do we have meters? The purpose of the parking meters, time limits of the parking meters, is to create parking turnover. Within our downtown, there are about 600 businesses. Out of 600, about 100 are restaurants. Restaurants require a lot of employees. So if you had a 5,000 square foot space that's retail, you can operate that with a couple employees. Restaurant, you have lunch shift, you have dinner shift. Those shifts require a lot of employees. Cheesecake Factory alone has 120 employees that work the Friday, Saturday night shift. Across the street, Ruth Chris, they have about 30 to 35 that work Friday, Saturday night. That's one shift. We're at almost 200 spaces. We have 98 more businesses to go down the list. Restaurants to go down the list. So restaurants require a lot of parking. Where do all these employees park? Happy to announce we did the first in the nation private-public partnership with the City of Walnut Creek Downtown Business Association, and property owners. And what we did, how we put this program together, the city was looking for spaces, land space in the downtown to build a parking garage. There's not a lot of land left, and what land there is left, there wasn't a big enough footprint to do it. You had to, get 2 or 3 property owners in that wanted to sell. It really became a challenge for the city to do it. Not to mention the economics, the price to do it. It just didn't make a lot of sense. So what we came up with was we looked at what parking lots in the area, you pull up on Google Map, what parking lots in the area do we have where spaces are under 85%? What parking lots do they have more spaces than they need? Can we move some of these employees that work in downtown in these parking lots? And so this is a map. This is like a few of them that we have. But the first one, when we came up with this concept, I thought, God, if we could get the CVS parking lot, because they have a lot of spaces. They don't need a lot of spaces, but they have a ton of spaces. So I thought, if we could convince them to give up a good part of their parking lot for this parking program, that would be huge. Then others would follow. We could get banks, we could get office buildings, we could get many others to follow. So I was very persistent in meeting with CVS. We met with their corporate office. The corporate office actually put it back on to the decision of the manager. The manager basically blew me off for 3 or 4 months. Wouldn't meet with me, wouldn't take my phone calls, and I was just persistent. So finally, he finally got a hold of him. I got kind of cornered, and he said, "Okay, I'll set up a meeting for you." He gave me like a week, 2 weeks time schedule. Thursday night or at midnight, he wanted to meet with me. Some crazy, okay, fine. So he couldn't believe when I showed up on that date at midnight for the meeting. And in fact, he was actually surprised. He said, no, what are you here for? So I kind of did a little presentation to him. And he said, well, I got to talk to the corporate office. I said, well, we already talked to the corporate office. They said, you have the authority to do this. He said, well, I still have to talk to corporate. So I didn't hear from him for a week, called him, kind of blew my calls off. Finally showed up again. He did the same thing. I can meet with you in about a week, 10 days. Gave me a date. I can meet you with you at 6 in the morning. So I showed up at his office at 6 in the morning. And I think he got tired of me hounding him. He finally signed the agreement. And so that was a kickoff in the employee parking program. And then we got many others to follow. But, you get all these laws. How do you advertise that? How do employees know about this? So what we did is we put an app together. We call it Look, Book, and Park. And employees can go in the app and find where there's open parking spaces. And they can buy a hourly we actually just launched that hourly space at 50 cents an hour, all-day pass at $5 a day, or a monthly at $50 per month. We didn't want to have a conflict of interest in this program because the money goes to us and it gets it's distributed out to the property owners, and then the money we make, it goes out to advertisement and of the program. And anyways, we didn't want to have a conflict of interest in it, so we let the city and downtown business association work with the businesses to come out with what the rate would be. And it was hard because it's, I thought it was going to be like $3 a day, but it was a fine balance. I told the downtown association and city, we're talking to employees, it has to be high enough to make it worthwhile for the property owner, because if it's too low, they're gonna, it's not worth it. And so it had to be high enough. So that's how they came up with the $5. So a very reasonable rate and option. This is an ad campaign that we did for the program. They can go on our website at parksmartinc.com and click on Employee Parking Program and actually book the spaces or download the app. One of the things when we put the program together was we wanted to encourage the bigger companies to subsidize parking for their employees. And, living costs, everything was going up here in the Bay Area. And so we talked to Apple, and Apple was subsidizing parking, but they said it was very just a pain for them to manage, because at the time the city garages were full and most of the employees couldn't park in city garages. They were paying like daily rates, and the garages were filling up. And so how they worked it was they would collect the receipts from all the employees, 130 employees, at the end of the month, and they'd have an auditor go through the receipts, and then they would reimburse them. So we actually designed a software program which allows them, we give them a username and password, and it lists the lots that are available to them. And they can add employees, delete employees, and it just automatically bills them at the end of the month. They actually love our software so much, they want to use our software for their new headquarters they're building in Cupertino, not for paid parking, but to manage their staff employee parking. Some of the other businesses that joined in on this was Z Gallery, Forma Gym, AT&T. We got a host of others, but it's really cool. We get we got the retailer business owner to subsidize the parking for the employees, and it just makes it so easy for them to just go in there, add employees, delete employees. once they add an employee, or once an employee purchases a spot for a day or hour, that data is in real time. It's uploaded to our handheld mobile devices, so our guys out in the field going around making sure people are following the rules, they have that data. It also goes up into our LPR car. This is kind of cool. You've probably seen them around town. But anyways, there's cool cameras up on top. When we're driving through these lots, it's actually scanning the plate number, so it knows right away if a car is valid or not valid. And the person, our parking enforcer, gets alerted if it's a non-valid car. Most people are really, really good about it, so we don't have too much trouble. Cheesecake Factory, this is a garage that we did. We put meters on the ground level. And when we presented this, it was the first in the nation. Nobody had ever put meters in a parking garage before. And anyways, when we did our presentation, it was a big publicly held company based back east. And they hired a consultant to look at our proposal. And after our presentation, their consultant just ripped me apart, saying, "You have no clue what you're doing. This has never been done before. The property owner could make, a lot of money by putting gates in and charging everybody for parking." And my response back was like, "Do you know who the tenants are?" And he couldn't even answer that question. I said, "You got Starbucks, you got Chipotle, you got Ike's Sandwich Shop. You think you're going to go in a gate, get a ticket, go get, pay to get a cup of coffee? It's not going to happen. You're going to get on that freeway, you're going to get off the next exit and go somewhere else." So it's going to hurt this development, it's going to hurt the retailers, and it's going to hurt the value of this project. And so anyways, our CEO was quiet during the whole meeting, and at the end, I'm packing up. He said, "I agree 100% everything you said." He said, "We'll get back with you in about a week." I got a personal call from him the next morning saying, "Hey, how soon can you get him in?" So the concept with this, we wanted to give, it's kind of like airlines. We wanted to turn the prime parking spaces. We don't want that ground level to fill. If you're going to get a cup of coffee, if you want to park for free, great. Go up 1 or 2 levels. If you want to park really close, put your quarter in, or however long you're going to be. So it creates a great turnover. So perception, consumer perception. You come down, you have that option. You have a free option if you want that free option. So that's the concept behind it. There's another project we did. We put meters in next to the rooftop restaurant. It was a Walnut Creek Auto. We literally park hundreds and hundreds of cars there a day. They're just great turnover. It's a prime location. And, before we did that, employees would just poach on that. Employees would take up the spaces all day. Customers couldn't park. We did the first in the nation private-public partnership with the City of Walnut Creek and the company that Carla mentioned, SmartKing. And we share our data. We're transparent. We share our data with Carla from the city, and to make decisions on the occupancy rates and whether you raise rates or lower rates or whatever. Pretty soon we'll have it in real time. Right now whatever month Carla asks for or locations, we can give her the access code to get in there, or we can print out the documents for her. And so it's very important. I know we are the first city or the first company ever to do anything like this, to share data, private data with a city. But it's so important to make sure that we're transparent, A, and then B, to make sure parking works for everybody. This is a really cool thing that we've done now. There's so many great restaurants in Walnut Creek. And wouldn't it be really, really cool if you could call up the restaurant, make a reservation, and the hostess said, "Would you like complimentary validated parking?" Or you go on to Open Table and you book your reservation through Open Table. Wouldn't it be great if the option would be for validated parking? So we've actually done that. We've created a software. It will be scheduled to be released on November 15th. And what it does is it allows, we're using our spaces that are under 85% occupancy. And those spaces now will go onto the software. So the restaurant, when you call up to make that reservation, they click on our software screen, which is right here. They simply click on the license plate number of the car, and it will give a drop-down menu of what locations are under 85% occupied. And once they hit confirm, they take the license plate number down, the person's cell number down, they hit enter. They will get a text message, welcome to, thank you for dining at Prima Restaurant. enjoy your complimentary parking, and then it will attach a GPS Google map will actually guide you to that parking lot, and you're good for the evening. We're also doing the same system with the valet, where we're working on it, with a valet parking stand. So we like to do this with the valet operators as well. So when you pull up to have your car valet parked, the valet operator will have a list of valet parking lots. So what the goal is, we're making better use of underutilized parking spaces. We want to make sure that spaces that are under 85% are being better occupied and better used. So we're making the most out of our existing inventory. This is the map that the consumer would get. So anyways, bottom line, without parking rules, you have parking chaos. And that's about it. Any questions?
I'm curious what the upcoming open table integration will look like from the restaurants. Oh, thanks. I should have known better. I'm curious what the upcoming restaurant integration will look like from the restaurant's perspective. So are they basically subsidizing that spot? And
Yeah, so it's interesting. So we're doing a pilot with Momo's restaurant is agreed to do the pilot, and we have a couple other restaurants agreeing to do the pilot. So how it's set up is they would pay for the spaces. Some are free. Some we'll do free at no charge. We're doing a deal in Lafayette, which is really cool. There's a restaurant 2 doors down from a Wells Fargo Bank parking lot in Lafayette. Wells Fargo wanted us to put in a pay machine there and charge for parking. We looked at it and it's like, once you put a payment thing, people just aren't going to park there. Doesn't pencil out for us to even do that. So we thought, God, it might be really cool thing to do is use our software integration and allow this restaurant to do free complimentary parking where they're not charged for it, the consumer's not charged for it. So you call and make the reservation, it would direct them to that parking lot. And then on the app, when they get their text message confirmation, it'll say compliments of Wells Fargo Bank. And so Wells Fargo absolutely loves it. We met with their higher ups, their head of all the real estate in the country. They absolutely loved it. So we're going to do this a pilot. They like us to do it at other locations. See how this one goes. But anyways, I hope that answered your question. Yeah.
Jerry, if you can hold on 1 second, I'd like to make sure we record that. Thanks.
Jerry Loving, what does one of these parking meters cost installed?
We're $1,500. $1,700, depending on what we have to do to install it. Sometimes we have to do, if it's in a garage, or we have to do a plate, so $1,500 to $1,700 per stall. It's expensive. And there's several components to it. You have the mechanism, you have the housing, you have the locks, you have the pole, you have the sleeve. The list is so it's not it's different vendors. You have to piece it all together. So.
As you know, parking is becoming one of the more expensive pieces to build in a new development, and what we're doing on the residential side is putting stackers in where people are going in and parking themselves, and it's a little jigsaw puzzle. But I'm curious if you've seen that done in a commercial space, parking garage through a valet system. We're looking at it on potential office developments, but as it relates to retail or other office developments, have you seen that done anywhere, and
San Francisco? Yeah, San Francisco. I know Oakland has residential. I'm not sure about the commercial side of it. But yeah, the stackers are great. Carla had mentioned doing the attendant assisted parking. That is great concept. You're making better, utilizing, you can get a lot more spaces in by having an attendant, double park the cars. So you're creating more spaces with not a lot of, without the expense of having to build more parking or the high cost of putting in stackers. The stackers are pretty expensive to put in.
Bob, I had sorry, Terry, no, go ahead.
Thanks.
Bob, for new projects that have certain parking requirements, how is this interfacing with traffic and engineering requirements for on-site parking, and are there provisions for reciprocity or credits or off-site allocations when evaluating a new site plan?
Yeah, I think that's probably a better one for Carla to answer. I don't know if you want to.
Actually, Andy can probably answer that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think who the best. I don't want to speak on behalf. Yeah, I don't want to speak on behalf of the city. On behalf of the city here. But that, I mean, that's one of the concept goals of doing the attendant stack parking, where as a developer, if you're going in and you don't have the footprint, or it's so expensive to go underground, it just doesn't pencil out. How do you make better use out of existing inventory? So the city is, I think, going to be looking at that possibility where a developer could go in and use attendant-assisted parking in off-strike parking lots to meet their parking needs, demand. Did I answer that okay, Carla? Yeah. Okay.
Actually, unless there are any other questions, I think that's actually, no, you guys are right in line. That's a great segue into, I think, Andy Smith, who's our senior planner for long-range and transportation planning, talking about the future of parking, potentially change to rules and regs, the regulatory environment, and how this all ties together. So I'd like to thank both Carla and Bob as Andy prepares for exploring the future of parking here in the city of Walnut Creek. Andy.
Good morning, everybody. My coffee's still kicking in, so pardon me if I'm a little slow. So I'm here to talk about something that's very exciting sounding, transportation demand management, which for the purposes of our discussion this morning is really kind of a stuffy way of saying, well, what if you didn't need to park? That's one of the things, I head up our long-range and transportation planning program, and so from the transportation angle of things, one of the things we're trying to do is basically get people out of their cars at least to some amount. Obviously cuts down on traffic, but also would reduce the demand for parking, and then of course there's obviously, other benefits, air quality and the like. But let's keep this real. People drive in Walnut Creek. With the exception of about maybe 3 blocks on each Main Street and Locust Street, the entirety of Walnut Creek, and frankly this entire region, was designed around the automobile. How far apart businesses are, homes are, parking lots, the roads, everything. I mean, you really need a car to get around, and that's just because pretty much everything out here was built, after the automobile came to be the key player in the transportation network. But what if we could make just even a small incremental reduction in the amount of cars that are, say, coming into downtown? Carla mentioned that there's about 10,000 parking spaces in our downtown. If we're able to reduce the demand by just 5%, that's 500 fewer parking spaces needed. That's a good-sized city parking garage that all of a sudden we wouldn't need to have. And so, I'm not here to say, hey, we're all going to be, riding their bikes and walking and taking transit and everything, and nobody's going to be driving, because come on, people are going to be driving. But there is things that we could do. Even a small improvement can make a big difference. And when we talk about what kind of things can we do, or what kind of things has the city done to reduce parking demand, one of the easy things for me to point to is, of course, the free trolley, the downtown trolley. It's actually, technically speaking, Route 4, County Connection Route 4. But I know it's going through probably a lot of your minds. Yeah, come on, nobody takes the bus. Give me a break. Drive. Well, actually, last year, 24,000 riders took just this one route, the free trolley. And you think about it, that comes out to, maybe 50 to 60 parking spaces that we don't need downtown. And when you figure the cost of building those parking spaces, not to mention, obviously, the traffic and whatnot associated with it, all of a sudden, things like the free trolley start to make sense. Now, is somebody coming to shop at Neiman Marcus going to take the bus? Probably not. Is somebody who's coming to work at Neiman Marcus going to take the bus? Oh, yeah. And in fact, a good amount of our ridership on this one route happens to be downtown employees, the retail and restaurant employees, as well as students for that matter. We also subsidize the Route 5. That's the not so glamorous because it doesn't have the little cutesy-poo trolley stuff on the bus. But that's subsidized by the city, so it's free. You don't have to pay to ride the bus. Runs every 20 minutes from the BART station, California, Newell, South Main, Creekside. Creekside's got thousands of apartment units there. And if you were to go out down to Creekside in the morning, you would find people lined up at the bus stops waiting for the bus to take them to BART, and standing room only on the bus. Also, the Shadelands Property PBID, was it Property Business Improvement District? Yeah. Anyway, the Shadelands, business and property owners group out the Shadelands Business Park, they subsidize the Route 7, which also provides high frequency free route, the Route 7, from the Pleasant Hill BART station out to Shadelands to be able to provide an alternative for employees out there. And these 3 routes, you're talking tens of thousands of riders every year. So, working at that little, say, 5%, the bus actually is a viable option. And one of the things that we're working on actually to try to make it an even more attractive option, this is something that actually I'm going to give a shout out to Ozzy Arce, who's taking a sip from his coffee. He works with me, and he was successful in applying for a grant to basically design and install some high-tech bus shelters around the downtown areas. 10 of them will have a public art component, actually. And this is the type of thing that will really help to encourage people to take the bus to work at the restaurant or at Neiman or wherever, rather than driving and taking up one of your valuable parking spaces. Biking is, of course, another option. Now, there's a lot of very passionate bike advocates out there that will ride their bike everywhere, no matter what. I'm not one of them. I do have a bike. But, you hear it thrown about a lot, and obviously there's the bike to work day that, happens once a year. Well, come on, who's going to ride their bike to work, please? Well, actually, I would sometimes, if it were safe. During the rush hour, when, traffic is doing its thing, I can ride my bike to City Hall about as quickly as it takes me to drive, park in the garage, and walk here from the garage. The problem is that there's this, because it's a straight shot up and down the Iron Horse Trail for me. The problem is that there's this little gap getting from my neighborhood to the Iron Horse Trail, where during rush hour, I'm taking my life into my hands more than I would normally take my life into my hands just to get to said Iron Horse Trail, and I'm not about to do that. And so one of the things that we work with traffic engineering, together with transportation planning, is to try to fill those gaps, because these small incremental improvements can sometimes have a pretty significant effect. One of the things that we're working on, and this is actually not my safety gap, but others, and actually Ozzy is also working on this one, is the Lincoln Avenue cycle track. Now, this is not something that's on the ground yet, it's still in the design phases, but basically this is something that would be providing a physically separated 2-way bicycle route between the Iron Horse Trail and the traditional downtown near the library, basically to make safer that interface between bikes and cars, and then hopefully get some small increment of increase of bicycle riders rather than just people driving and taking up your valuable parking spaces. Bike share is also another thing that's on the horizon. If you've been around San Francisco or Oakland recently, you've probably seen big stands of these blue bikes that, oddly enough, are from Ford. Ford doesn't just make airplanes, by the way. Ford Trimotor, I've actually flown on one, but cars, obviously. So Ford has kind of gone in a big way with the bike share. And we've, for quite a while, have been trying to get something like this to come to Walnut Creek. And in fact, a bike share vendor company came out and asked to meet with us. It was just 2 weeks. Or were you in that meeting? I forget now. I was not. Was it last week? God, I've been too busy. They actually have a model of a stationless bike share where instead of having these big racks installed and taking up a bunch of space, each bike has its own little GPS computer thing so that, if it's a bright orange bike, you walk up, you scan the QR code on your phone, pay, I think it's like $1 an hour or something like that. The thing unlocks, you go on your way, you park it at a bike rack or legally on the sidewalk when you get to your destination and go on from there. That's something where they are actually coming to us saying, hey, we'd like to do this here in Walnut Creek, and we're working with them on that. But, a lot of people probably thinking, bike share, what? Come on, I'm commuting from Brentwood. I'm not going to ride my bike 30 miles from Brentwood. Give me a break. But wait a minute, maybe I can ride my bike to lunch. Somebody who's, say, working up near the BART station, Ignacio Plaza, and they've got a hankering for Thai food for lunch, and they want to go to Kasha Thai. Well, right now, that's, by the way, an Olympia place. Right now, they're probably going to hop in their car, drive, take up one of your valuable parking spaces, and, of course, add more traffic to the road. And as Carla mentioned, it's lunch and dinner that are our peak periods for parking demand. Well, hey, if they got one of these out in front, and it's a nice day, you just ride down there instead. And that parking space that they would have taken is kept available for somebody else instead. Then there's the kind of the traditional TDM, traffic demand management type things. Employee commute alternative programs, for example. And these are basically things that employers can provide for their employees. And actually, some of these can work for residential developments, as I'll explain in a moment. Subsidized transit passes. Now, the city of Walnut Creek, we actually subsidize to a limited amount BART and County Connection passes for our employees. You can basically buy a discounted pass so that you can hopefully take transit to work instead of driving. From a residential developer standpoint, there's these things called eco passes. VTA down in Santa Clara County has them, AC Transit, Muni, I want to say Samtrans as well. County Connection tried something kind of like this recently, and we're trying to get them to try it again. What it basically is let's say you're an apartment owner and you've got a large apartment complex. You can buy transit passes for everybody in the complex at a greatly reduced rate, because the transit provider is running under the assumption, yeah, everybody's buying a transit pass, only a few of them are going to use it. So it's a relatively small cost, but you still do get that increment, working towards that, say, 5% reduction or mode shift, changing people out of their cars. That's something that a residential developer can do to reduce their parking demand and perhaps reduce the amount of parking spaces they have to provide. It's also something, obviously, they can use to attract tenants, which, of course, in this market, you probably don't have any trouble attracting tenants, but when things change. Other things, telecommuting, of course, that's long been something that works for some employees in certain industries. Obviously, if it's more of a desk-based job, if you're 1 day a week, let's say 1 day a week you're working from home. Well, that's a 20% reduction in your commuting. It's a 20% reduction in your parking usage. Again, if we're talking about, hey, if we can reduce downtown parking by 5%, that's 500 spaces. Hey, telecommuting, that's a 20% reduction on a per person basis if you're doing it 1 day a week. And then there's things like flexible work schedules, 980s, 410s. So 410 is you work 4 10-hour days in a week. That's your 40 hours. 980 is actually something that I'm on. This is something that the city of Walnut Creek provides or offers to its employees. So I work 9-hour days, and I get every other Friday off. Of course, I actually usually work more than 9-hour days, but still I get the every other Friday off. And, you may be thinking, well, why would an employer want to do that? Well, this is why. That's my son at the San Francisco Zoo. Last Friday, I had the day off. It was really smoky, and decided, you know what, San Francisco Zoo is out by the ocean. The air is clean there, and I like to take him on little Friday adventures anyway. He's 5.5, by the way. His birthday's on Monday. So Diego and I will, hop on the bus and Bart go into the city. And so I was able to spend the day with him at the zoo. And as a father, that is a great thing for me to do. So you're, again, like, yeah, so why would an employer want to do this? Do you think me getting those every other Fridays off so I can spend the day with my little boy helps keep me here as a happy employee? You betcha. I'll tell you, the city of Concord has tried to recruit me a couple of times. They don't have 980 yet. That's one of the reasons why I'm still here. Of course, I love working for Walnut Creek anyway, let's be honest. But, it's one of those things that kind of goes into the calculus there. Now, I can see Jerry here, he's going to run over to Concord this afternoon. You need to get that 980. I've got to get Andy out of my hair. But anyways, again, things to think of. And all of these cut down on the parking demand, which then cuts down on the amount of parking that you need to provide, that parking of which is extremely expensive. So what more can we do? Well, we actually have another grant that we're going to be starting work on. And Ozzy, I keep pointing over to Ozzy. You're going to be really busy. Have some more coffee. Yeah, right. Whoops. We've got a grant to basically do a TDM strategy, Transportation Demand Management Strategy. And so that TDM can cover any number of things. The stuff I was just talking about, there's also rideshare, carpooling, there's a lot of options. Every city's got its own uniqueness, and what will work in, Walnut Creek might not work elsewhere and vice versa. But we're going to be actually looking over the next year or so at what kind of programs can we implement as a city, actual operations of the city, or options that can become kind of fit into our parking regulations For private development, one of the, we're going to be looking at, what options do we have for perhaps increasing the bus shuttles that we have downtown, and perhaps more importantly, finding a stable funding source for that, for, the fare box offset. And right-sizing our parking. About a third of this program is actually going to be right-sizing our parking standards, finding that Goldilocks spot. Because as developers, I mean, let's face it, as a city planner, hey, we need to design around people. The reality is we're designing around the car, especially when it comes to the architecture of an individual building. The less we have to do that, the better. And parking spaces, especially out here where you pretty much have to do it in a structure or underground, is really expensive. I don't need to tell you that. And so we're actually going to be looking at what can we do, what kind of programs can we have to reduce the parking. Maybe we're just requiring too much parking to begin with right now, particularly for multifamily. That's what we're finding. I'm not going to say we're there with retail, but for multifamily, you go around to these newer complexes, you see a lot of empty parking spaces. But we'll also, we're going to look at trying to build into our parking standards options. Hey, if you provide an eco-pass, maybe you got a reduction of the amount of parking that you have to provide. And of course, then that saves you, the developer, a great deal of money. So kind of our takeaway, remember, only one of these needs a parking space and that large amount of valuable downtown Walnut Creek real estate. And even a small change can have a large impact. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Oh, I guess I'll have to share the mic. I'll use this one.
Yeah, I just have one comment. When we think about, as a private developer, transportation demand management and trends today, we're seeing, especially with kind of the millennial generation, potentially moving out of places like San Francisco, out here to Walnut Creek, and the trends with the ride sharing. What we're thinking about on a new development side is adding stuff like drop-off areas, and we think, I don't think municipalities have necessarily moved that far yet in thinking about how that changes the demand of a particular development, both on the commercial space and on the residential space, but figuring out ways to get transportation and parking type of credits for stuff like that, which is harder to quantify. Yeah. But where we think the bigger trends is, both from a public safety standpoint, as far as when we talk about the peak demand in downtown being lunch and dinner times, and people wanting to have a couple drinks and go downtown, I think there will be more of a openness for people to order an Uber from their house, bring it downtown, offsets parking demand downtown. But then, like you said, also from the residential side of being able to incorporate some of these drop-off areas. So as much as cities can anticipate that and figure out ways to help us reduce parking costs, from that standpoint, I think is helpful.
I agree completely. Those are very good comments. And I will say, actually, that right now is a very interesting time for me to be a long-range city planner and transportation planner, because things are changing rapidly. I mean, there's the technology. There's Uber on the horizon. There's, autonomous vehicles. If you've got a car that can go park itself somewhere far away, or pick somebody else up instead of parking, that can obviously cut down greatly on the parking demand. And then there's, of course, also the kind of the social and generational changes. Fortunately, Ozzy, he loves it when I bring attention to him. Ozzy's a millennial, so he's got that. Oh, I know. It's not until you're 40 years old that you're a protected class, and I can get in trouble for talking about your age. But those are definitely things that we're going to be looking into. Not just the traditional 1950s model of so many parking spaces per 100 square feet of floor area or per dwelling unit or bedroom.
Yeah, I don't know if this is kind of similar to what you talked about, but you showed that last slide. You had those things, and I don't know if the Ubers were one of those bubbles, and maybe this is a question that maybe both you and Bob can answer, because that seems to be a real game changer in all of this calculus. My daughter's at a college right now where it's free Uber from 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. free Uber for all students within 2 miles of that campus. Pleasanton, where we have a development, they're looking at offering for peak hours free Uber for their residents to come downtown. So I don't know, if that's for both of you, probably in the next few years, something that's going to possibly be a big part of this calculus.
Yeah, that would actually be that's not car sharing, it's ride sharing, which they say van pool carpooling, but actually, the Uber and Lyft would probably most clearly or cleanly fall into that petal of the flower. But you're absolutely right, and that's part of that. We're especially in transportation, we're seeing we're in a period of very intense change, and there's a lot of kind of gazing into the crystal ball, to be honest with you. But that's definitely something that's why we're going to be working on this TDM strategy, is to be able to look at that stuff and hopefully make some wise choices.
This may be just teeing this up for you, but this is, I know, the introduction of this topic, but there will be more discussions. What's the best way if people want to stay engaged and be able to keep giving input for them to do so?
I just realized I don't have my contact information up here. Contact Ozzy. Yeah, we'll have both of our. So basically, we're going to be working with a consultant on this. The real work in terms of kind of the public face of the work is going to be starting early next year, I would say. But we definitely want to get we really want your participation. There's only so much that we're going to know, and there's only so much that a consultant's going to know. You're the folks that are actually on the ground doing this stuff, and so it's extremely important to have your input on that.
I'd just like to echo that, to say this is why we wanted to have this forum. This is exactly why. We value that input, and so we appreciate the comments and concerns and questions raised and everything else. I want to be mindful of your time. I know we typically end a little bit early, but this was a great topic, and I don't want to cut conversations short. Please feel free to engage staff that's here if you'd like, or to Jessica's point, we are going to send out a follow-up email. There will be a link to the YouTube channel if you want to follow up on something, or you misheard something, or you want to check something. We'll have contact info and everything else. I want to thank you all for attending, again, our monthly forum. We will have one in November. The topic to be determined is likely more of a wrap-up. We have been at this for a year, which is incredible to say that. But we've been at this a year in terms of the forum. Hopefully you've gotten something out of it in points along the way. And we'll be in touch for next month, November 15th, third Wednesday of the month, as every month. And that'll be the final one for 2017. We'll look ahead. We'll look ahead to 18, and we'll talk about more about what you want to talk about at that point. So thank you all for attending. Have a great day.
Thanks, Ethan. Good job.